My natural tendency is to dissent, to rebel, and not just to be a troublemaker, but to resist the norm in advocating for justice to improve people's lives. All my life, that has been what I've done. You might say I was born into it, and in fact I was. I was born here at this hospital, a very special place, Forest City Hospital in Cleveland, Ohio. Let me tell you a story. In the 1950s, and for many, many years before, black doctors in most cities were not allowed hospital privileges. So there were plenty of black doctors practicing then, but it was mostly on an outpatient basis. So they made house calls, and they saw patients in their offices, but if they had a patient that was sick enough to require hospitalization, they had to hand that patient over to a white physician who would then admit them to the dark, unsanitary, segregated wards of the white hospitals. In late 1950s, Cleveland, Ohio, and around the country, black doctors had enough. They petitioned the city for a charter, raised their own funds, and started their own hospital. And in Cleveland, this was that hospital. That hospital opened to doctors of all races and patients of all races. And on January 24th, 1965, I'm proud to have drawn my first breath in this hospital that itself was born out of the spirit of defiance. And then when I was very young, my birth city introduced me to another form of resistance, the race riot. In 1966, the black community of Huff in Cleveland experienced a 3-day race riot that was an expression of black rage from years of police brutality and indifference from City Hall. When the riot broke out, the police arrived, and in order to instill order, they shot out the street lights to instill darkness. To retaliate, the protesters set buildings on fire and did millions of dollars of damage. Many people were injured, hundreds, and several deaths. Finally, it took the Ohio National Guard being called out with their tanks and military weapons to squash this riot. But in the middle of this riot, in that violence, a short walk from the center of the violence, in an apartment was a young mother, frightened, the doors locked and windows locked, watching the action on TV with a 1-year-old little boy watching with her. Hi, Mom. So that little boy grew up to be a physician. And really, what else would I be? Because if it is the norm for people to get diseases and get sick and die, then trying to cure diseases and prolonging life is itself a revolutionary act. And I've tried to combine my passion for healing patients with a passion for healing society. And I've had some terrific role models serve as beacons of light. Here's one, Dr. Lewis Tompkins Wright, very special man, one of the first African Americans to graduate from Harvard Medical School. Dr. Wright did his undergraduate school at Clark College, a small black school in Atlanta. And when the administrators at Harvard Medical School saw this impeccable record, they mistakenly thought that it was from the all-white Clark College in Massachusetts. So he was accepted, right out of hand. Well, when Lewis Tompkins Wright, this black man from the South, showed up, having attended this small black school that they hadn't heard of, those Harvard professors had a problem on their hands. So they decided they'd make him a deal. If he could pass an impromptu oral chemistry exam, they would let him take a seat in the class. He passed it with flying colors and went on to be one of the top students in his class, but they found out between admission and graduation that they had a rebel on their hands because he didn't back down to anybody or anything. When it was time for the students to learn obstetrics, delivering babies, the students were to call on women at the prestigious Harvard Women's Hospital. So one day the professor called Lewis aside and said, "Lewis, great news. We've made arrangements for you to learn obstetrics with a private black doctor in town who calls on black women. but it's going to be great. You see, the professors were concerned that the white women at Harvard's women's hospitals and their husbands would have a problem with the black men delivering their babies. The professor was surprised at Lewis's response, which was, "When will I get my refund?" The professor said, "Well, what are you talking about?" Lewis said, "I pay tuition like every student in this place, and I'm going to have the same experience as everyone else, and if not, I'll be expecting a full refund of my tuition." Well, his classmates overheard what was quickly becoming an argument, and they rushed there and they intervened on his behalf, and he was allowed to do the rotation. In another example that shows you the fire inside this man, he once put down his books and skipped classes for a week to protest with the local NAACP outside of a movie theater in Boston because it was showing the very racist film, Birth of a Nation. So he missed a whole week of classes, but still graduated at the top of his class, went on to be an outstanding surgeon and researcher who never stopped combining his love for his profession with a passion for equality and justice for all. At about the same time, Dr. Frantz Fanon, another role model, was practicing psychiatry. And Dr. Fanon went on to be one of the greatest theorists of the psychopathology of oppressed persons in the world. He wrote about how the oppressed person really tries to become like the oppressor, takes on their habits, their culture, their music, their food, their language, even adopts the oppressor's ideal of beauty. And he wrote about how all of this is a form of self-hatred often seen in colonized persons. Fanon grew up in Martinique, an island nation that at the time was colonized by France and populated by African slaves and their descendants. He grew up witnessing brutal and often humiliating treatment of the black Martinicans at the hands of the French military. He wrote about this and continued to study it, went to France, became a physician and a psychiatrist, and treated many patients with mental illness brought on by the stress of being a colonized person. He finally made his way to Algeria, an African nation, which at the time was also a French colony, and continued to practice and work on his theories. Yes. Well, when the Algerians decided to strike out for independence, he actually fell in with the revolutionaries. What an ingrate. Can you believe that? So, he denounced his French citizenship and fell in with the rebels and the freedom fighters. He wrote about this in a classic book, The Wretched of the Earth, which internationally is still considered a classic on the correct handling of a revolution. Dr. Fanon was brilliant, and he used his practice and his pen to strike a blow for racial justice. Another role model, Dr. Tolbert Small in California, also combines his practice with a passion for justice. He'd always been an activist, even as a student and a medical student, and when he drove out to California to start his medical residency, he went to Oakland and drove right up to the Black Panther Party's national headquarters because he believed, like they did, that it was time to put an end to police brutality, and he believed in the right of the black community to determine its own destiny. In his long association with this group, he founded their free clinics, their free ambulance service, their free pharmacy, and started their sickle cell anemia screening programs. He is a physician/activist of the highest order and never stopped combining those two. Like my role models, I try to combine my compassion for patients with my concern and drive to cure some of society's ills. In my work every day, to do this, I go against the norm. I resist the norm. When the norm is that often women and minorities are delivered an inferior quality of care, I disagree. So I deliver the highest quality of care to all my patients, and I teach my students and trainees to do the same. When the norm is that today's medical schools enroll classes that don't come close to reflecting the rich diversity in this nation and justify it by saying they can't find qualified minority candidates, especially black men, I disagree. And with a very talented team of leaders, we've made this one of the most diverse medical schools in the nation. We nurture these students, all of them, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, men, women, and know that we're producing physicians and physician/activists that will strike out for justice as they are treating their patients. You know, this notion, this tendency to combine the passion for your profession with a passion for justice is alive and well right here at the Ohio State University. Take a look at these students gathering together to put on a demonstration protesting the shooting of unarmed black men by police officers. The most beautiful thing about this picture to me is that while this is a demonstration for the very lives of black men, who do you see? White men, white women, Asian and Hispanic men and women, black women, student leaders from our student LGBT group, medical students, nursing students, pharmacy students, all working together for the common good. Our students are students/activists. And ladies and gentlemen, we need for you to do the same. Doesn't matter what your major, doesn't matter if you're black or white, man or woman, your sexual orientation. If you're an English major, be an English major/activist. If you're a neuroscience major, be a neuroscience major/activist. If you're a plumber, be a plumber/activist. You're an artist, be an artist/activist. Now is the time for you to be who you are. I can't help it. Remember, I was born into it. But you know what? So were you. Because wherever you were born and whenever you were born, I guarantee you, at that time, there was some injustice being done. And it is natural for you to want to be treated fairly, and it is just as natural for you to want to see others treated fairly. So if you're not using your talent, your intellect, and your passion for your vocation to strike out against injustice and stand up for what's fair and what's right, then you're going against your natural selves. Ladies and gentlemen, in this world right now, especially right now, we need for you to be who you are, and whatever your major or vocation, be that thing/activist. Please. Thank you.